You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, biohacking, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere and anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your host, Dr. Justin Marcagiani, as he answers your burning health questions as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio. Feel free and head over to beyondwellnessradio.com where you can access our full podcast transcriptions. While you're there, you can also sign up for our thyroid and female hormone video series. This series goes into the root cause of why your hormones are out of balance. While you're there, you can also schedule a functional medicine consult with Dr. Justin, myself, where we'll dig deeper into the root cause of your health challenges. Feel free and think of sharing this podcast with at least one person. This podcast grows by people sharing it. Sharing is caring. If you can think of one person that can benefit from this information, please feel free and share it. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you subscribe on iTunes. You can also click below the video or podcast where you'll see the iTunes review button and leave us a review. You can also sign up for the newsletter at beyondwellnessradio.com where you'll get updates before anyone else. Thank you so much and enjoy the show. Evan, it's Dr. J. What's going on, man?
Hey, not much. I had my own protein today. I was just telling you about it. And it's still delicious. I feel like when I was pitching my protein this week on my own show, I felt kind of like, man, I have to say it's delicious. But it really is. I've had a lot of people send me stuff, and you probably get stuff sent to you too to test things out. And organic vanilla bean's the real deal. It's not that fake vanilla bean, that natural flavor vanilla bean that comes from beavers' anal glands.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe that. So your whey protein, it's grass-fed, right? High quality stuff like that?
Yeah, and there's collagen in there too. I think I was getting fairy dusted at first, so I told them I wanted 14 grams of, it's a 20-gram scoop, so I told them, 14 grams I wanted to come from the grass-fed whey, and then 6 grams I wanted to come from collagen. And I can feel it. I don't know if that makes sense. I can feel when it goes into my body.
Dude, that's awesome. Anyone listening to the show, feel free to check out Evan's site, notjustpaleo.com. Get some good quality whey protein with some collagen in there. That's good stuff.
Yep. I'll send you some. As soon as we run this batch, I'll send you a few bottles of each.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of collagen, honestly. I mean, there's all kinds of good benefits for it, just for like healthy gut function and stuff. But let's just say you're vain and you want the aesthetic stuff. Great hair, great skin, great nails. I was actually saw Dave Asprey out a few months back. And, Dave's got his new hairstyle, right? Dave's the bulletproof exec. And I said, Dave, what the heck's going on with your hair? It looks really different. He's like, dude, I'm just upping my collagen levels. So I'm just like, hey, collagen's good for him. It's good for hair, good for skin, good for nails. And there's a lot of health benefits outside of the aesthetic. So in my opinion, it's a win-win.
Yeah, definitely.
So in our pre-game talk here, we chatted about cortisol. We felt like that this would be a really good topic to kind of bring to our listeners. So why don't you get the ball rolling, Evan?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about this because cortisol is a buzzword, first of all. So people are going to be like, oh, great, cortisol. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people have been convinced that high cortisol is always the case. And people think, I have high cortisol and it's causing me all my problems. But not one adrenal cortisol rhythm test that I've reviewed has had high cortisol. Every single one is low. Everyone's lower than they should be. And that's causing more problems. I mean, high cortisol is a big deal, but I think more people have been burnt out or burning the candle at both ends longer than they realize. And so that high cortisol stage, you've already passed that. Now you're in the low cortisol stage because you're running on fumes anymore. You're not just being chased by the tiger. You've been chased by the tiger for 40 years, and there's nothing left to help you run from that thing.
Absolutely. And cortisol is actually good for you. Like you said, most of the patients that we see, we run these salivary cortisol rhythm tests. And again, a salivary cortisol rhythm, it's looking at the free fraction of your cortisol. So I know a lot of people may get confused because they may have had their conventional doctor run a cortisol, and that's typically via blood. All right. And blood primarily, or actually it's only testing for cortisol, the serum, the protein bound cortisol. So imagine this. Imagine you got here's my analogy for the day. I know each day I kind of pull one of these out from where. I hope it resonates with people. So 2% of hormones are typically free fraction. So imagine a baseball going into a catcher's mitt, right? That's your 2%. And the other 98 out of the 100 are beach balls, right? Beach balls too big to fit into that catcher's mitt, but those baseballs can fit into the catcher's mitt. So a lot of the beach balls, for instance, are the 98% that are protein bound, right? They're made by the gland. It's a good measure of glandular function, which is great in conventional medicine because when they were testing for disease, right, pathology of the gland, it's great to measure the beach balls because the beach balls represent 98%. So it gives us a good window at actual gland output. But because the beach balls are so big, they can't get into the catcher's mitt. So we look for the baseballs. And the baseballs are the free fraction. They don't have a protein carrier attached to it, so they can actually go into that catcher's mitt, or in actual physiology and biochemistry, they can bind into that receptor site and have a metabolic effect.
I like that. That's a good analogy. So, the thing with cortisol, like I've mentioned, in the morning, you want it to be high. That's normal. That's a time where high cortisol is a good thing.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people wake up really early for work, sometimes 5 a.m., and they go to the coffee to get them up. But in reality, if you don't need as much time in the morning, say you can push your schedule back a little bit and try to wake up closer to 7 a.m. or closer to the actual sun up time, if you're getting up before the sun, and you can change that to getting up at sunrise, you're basically, I'm going to use my analogy that I mentioned to you. If you're getting up at 4 a.m. to get ready for work, you're only going halfway up the hill on your favorite roller coaster before you start going back down the hill. So you're going to get to the bottom of that hill a lot quicker, and it's not going to be as fun of a ride for you as if you were to get up closer to sunrise time or 7 a.m. and now you're at the top of that roller coaster hill. It's going to be a really fun ride, and you're going to have a lot longer distance to cover before you get to the bottom of that hill. And that's why people that are waking up too early or people that are not pumping out enough cortisol in the morning, by noon, they're bottomed out and the fun's over for the day. You might as well close shop and give up.
Exactly. And again, cortisol typically goes low with chronic stress. So if you see low cortisol, at one point you were probably in this high cortisol space. And we kind of go back into history when we kind of do an exam and intake, going back in time, was there a place where you were under a lot of stress, but you felt good? Like you had energy, you may have been stressed, you may have been anxious, but you had the energy, behind you to do all the things that you needed to do. And then at some point it started to teeter out where, you're having less energy, you're feeling more fatigue, you need more naps, you need more time sleeping, you spend more time resting on the weekend. And most people, when we do a detailed history, we see that pattern kind of unfolding and we progress. That's called stage 1. Again, depending on what lab you use, is a lab called Diagnostics out of Washington. They have I think 7 phases of adrenal fatigue. I like keeping things really simple. Again, if you're not able to break concepts down into simple, easy to explain analogies, it just tells me you don't really understand it that well yourself, or you're just a bad teacher, one of the two. So I pride myself on being a good teacher. So stage 1 is going to be that elevation in cortisol. Hans Selye called the alarm phase, if you will. And then phase 2 or stage 2 is when that cortisol is dropping. Typically what categorizes or what's characteristic of a stage 2 is we start to see some rhythm perturbations, some rhythm abnormalities, maybe a high morning or a low afternoon or a high late afternoon or a low night. We'll start to see some rhythm imbalances and some drops in DHEA, in your sex hormones. And then stage 3, we'll start to see it drop beneath 23. I think it's picomoles per liter is the amount that's typically used on your conventional salivary labs. Don't quote me though, but if you're running like your biohealth or your diagnostics, labs like that, that's your conventional range. And you'll start to see that go beneath 23 units. You typically see 2 or more rhythm disturbances, and you'll see lower or low DHEA in that as well.
How often is it for you to see all 4? Almost every single person I've run that on, it's all 4. They're low all day. They're below morning, below midday, below evening, and below night. I mean, I've never had anybody that's been in range on all four, actually.
I totally agree. And frankly, I'd say with majority of patients, I really don't need to run a adrenal cortisol test because I can just tell by symptoms and by talking with them. But at the same standpoint, though, my patients need to see it. They need to see it's real. And then it's really important to be able to see it, make a change, go back and retest and see it get better. That's like a really important thing. And again, there's a couple things. Every now and then we run these tests. I can't predict rhythm disturbances. So for instance, I'll be like, you're stage 3, but then they're low in the morning, high at night, their DHEA is low, and you get surprises. So one, you got to run the adrenal test just to see where you're at, because the weaker your adrenals are, the longer it's going to take you to heal, and also to heal your gut, because we need cortisol to heal our guts and to put out the fire in our gut. So typically, if you're doing a good questionnaire, and most people are going to be stage 3, but we need to see it. People need to see it's real. They need to see what kind of rhythm disturbances are there. They need to see where their DHEA is at. And then it's great to create a program, come back, retest it, and see rhythm come back into effect. See cortisol levels go up. See DHEA levels improve. It makes a huge difference for people being on track. It also gives them a sense of how long it's going to take to get better. And then it also really keeps them motivated and allows the functional medicine doctor to create a customized specific protocol, not a general one, which would be what I would be stuck doing if we just did it based on symptoms. It'd be a very general protocol. But with the labs, we can create a specific protocol. So instead of pulling out the RPG or the bazooka, I can pull out the sniper rifle and really target the exact rhythm, because it's not just giving support. We also want to really target the rhythm. So if we're low in certain areas, we want to use certain nutrients to bring it up. If we're high in certain areas, we want to use certain compounds to bring it down. And we want to time it throughout the day so we're mimicking normal hormonal physiology.
Perfect. That's great. That's actually improved some of the stuff that I was doing, because before, when, just like you said, I can assume that a lot of people are going to have adrenal issues, but I didn't know exactly what time. So if I was going to add in, say, an adaptogen, or if I was going to add in something like some phosphatidylserine, it's like, well, when do they need it? And I can use generalities, but now that I'm actually running more of those, I see like, man, it really is a good idea to run this, even though I probably already knew what it was going to tell me. It's just a little bit more accuracy. Let's talk about some of the symptoms of some of these issues. People may be hearing this and they're thinking, huh. So I had just a couple written down here, one being fatigue, another being aches and pains, or you wake up and you don't feel refreshed. Maybe you feel tired even after you had a full night of sleep. Yeah. You wake up and you're just like, gosh. Lightheadedness is something that I see a lot. Poor balance, just like you stand up and you're like, whoa. Crashing after meals, cravings, mood imbalances, headaches, digestive stuff. Another one that I don't have written down, but I experienced personally, was a loss of muscle at first. I guess in that first phase, that high cortisol basically catabolized my muscle.
You are a weakling.
And I know. I'm building back up now. I'm feeling good now that I've got my protocol under control. But what other symptoms? I mean, have I covered kind of the main things that you see as well?
Yeah, no, and actually you are putting on a lot more muscle, Evan. I can totally notice that. We got to bring the show to video format so you can flex for the listeners next time.
Sure.
But yeah, you're 100% right. I'd also say allergies are a big one. Joint pain, right? People that are chronically in pain, like think about it. When you go to the joint doctor, you're, I think that's a rheumatologist or orthopedist. I mean, they're going to give you a cortisone injection, and cortisone is the cousin or sister of cortisol, right? We have our natural anti-inflammatory being produced by our adrenals called cortisol, which we already talked about. And if we break the word cortisol down, it's really a glucocorticosteroid. And again, like we talked about, right? Medicine loves to use big words to keep people in the dark and feel confused. So we just break it down. Gluco, pertaining to blood glucose / energy, okay? Corticosteroid pertaining to stress and inflammation, right? Corticosteroid injection, right? Corticosteroid for inhalers, corticosteroid for creams, corticosteroid pills for pain, right? So pain, inflammation, stress, energy. So this is kind of the big things that cortisol are incredibly responsible for, but we also need healthy levels of cortisol for thyroid hormone activation, right? Goldilocks effect, too high, we shut down and block the thyroid. Too low, we can't convert and activate thyroid hormone. We need cortisol for healing or addressing inflammation in our gut and being resistant to common allergens. We need healthy cortisol levels to maintain energy and blood sugar throughout the day, so we're not having to eat every 2 hours like like you're grazing, like you're an animal. And then also just we need it to be able to help detoxify. Cortisol has a role in detoxification. Right? So we need healthy levels of cortisol just to be resistant to stress and the environment.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I want to get into some methods of healing, if you will, but maybe you could spend a minute or two explaining kind of why the functional model of looking at this stuff is superior to the conventional model, because you'll hear people, even if they don't even have in their consciousness an issue of adrenal dysregulation, they may just think that they need this cortisone shot. And that's not going to actually fix what's going on.
Absolutely. So first off, I'm going to get to that in a roundabout way. I feel like a politician answering your question here. So when we look at your cortisol rhythm, there's three things we always want to prioritize. Most people just look at the number, how much cortisol are you outputting throughout the day, right? And that's kind of what conventional medicine does, right? Addison's disease, super low cortisol, Cushing's disease, right? Cush, push, that means high cortisol, right? So we're looking at amounts with the conventional medicine. In functional medicine, we're really looking at rhythm. We're looking at what's your cortisol rhythm like. And a lot of this has to do with the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary. These are glands that sit a couple inches right behind your eyeballs, right between your eyes, and they're master controllers. They talk down to the thyroid, to the adrenals, to the gonads, etc. And again, they talk to the adrenals and they help regulate cortisol. So when we're stressed, those glands, that tissue loses communication, and we start seeing the aberrations and the perturbations in the cortisol rhythm. And that's one of the most important things we like to look at first. The second is cortisol amount. The third is then DHEA levels. So when we talk about the word adrenal fatigue, we're not talking about it from the perspective like a pancreas that's fatigued and can't make insulin. There may be some fatigue in the gland, but a lot of what we're talking about is HPA, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal. Just think brain talking to adrenal. That type of communication, that thermostat that talks to your adrenals, or the thermostat that talks to your heater or your AC in your house, is broken, so to speak. And just because the AC or the heater isn't running properly, it may not be the actual heater or AC. It may just be the thermostat. So a lot of what we're doing, we're supporting the actual gland. That's cool. But we're also supporting the brain. So I think when we're doing a lot of these programs, we're still working on the brain just as much as we are working on the adrenals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And go ahead.
No, keep going. That's great.
Now, getting back to the original question you asked me to begin with, when we look at conventional medicine, really what they're looking at adrenal failure. I've had probably 100 patients over the years that after our consult, we review what's going on. They go to their MD, they show them the test, they talk about it, and they say, your doctor's crazy. You don't have adrenal fatigue or adrenal failure, because they equate adrenal fatigue to Addison's disease or adrenal failure, where cortisol gets super, super, super low, where you can't regulate inflammation and the body starts shutting down, right? So they equate it to that in their mind, because that's what adrenals to them means, because they're in a pathology-based state, not in a functional state. So they come back and they're like, well, I don't have adrenal fatigue, or I don't have this adrenal imbalance. And then we just have to differentiate, right? The conventional doctor is looking at disease. That's Addison's disease. That's super, 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 super low cortisol levels, typically caused by an autoimmune condition that starts to destroy the adrenals. So we want to realize that, let's say on a spectrum of 1 to 10, 10 being optimal adrenal health and 1 being Addison's disease, you got to be at a 1 to have Addison's, right? That's kind of our subjective criteria. But most people that are going into the doctor maybe are sitting at 3 or 4 or 5. And again, they're far away from 10, right? But they're not near 1 yet, and they may never even get to 1. So they're going to their doctor and they're just saying, hey, what's up? And then their doctor says they're fine, but they're really not in a good place. So we are looking at things more from a functional perspective, not a pathology perspective. And that's the main thing. And again, most people are that 3 to 5 on that subjective range. So they'll never, ever be helped. They'll never, ever fall into that adrenal failure criteria, but they'll have this dysfunctional adrenal fatigue primarily driven by HPA, poor brain adrenal communication by chronic stress. And it's our job as the functional medicine doctor to figure out where that stress is coming from nutritionally, diet-wise, obviously all the emotional and lifestyle stressors, and then even bigger, the internal infection toxicity stressors.
Yeah. So let's get into if we can use the word treatment or the healing process. Something that I like to start with is the exercise, looking at that a little bit closer, because
Oh, yeah.
a lot of women think they have to do 6 days a week of their spinning class or 6 days a week of their CrossFit class. And then they combine that with 2 to 3 mornings of yoga. And then they combine that with another 2 to 3 afternoon workouts of weightlifting. And it's like, holy crap. It's like, no wonder you're so low. So that's kind of almost the first starting place for people, because at a certain point, too much or too intense exercise is going to tax this system. And if we're trying to rebuild it with some of these methods that we'll get into, you're just spinning your wheels. So I like to just tell people to go for a walk. If you live on the beach, go for a walk and get the wet sand in between your toes and try to reduce some stress that way. If you like to go swimming, that's a good way to do it. If you're not in chlorine pools, if you can get access to some saltwater pools or something like that, or a walk in the woods, just walking. I think that's like one of the most restorative but helpful exercises I could prescribe, if you will.
Absolutely. And I have a 3-step criteria that I use to help kind of evaluate whether exercise is positive stress or negative stress. And you got to answer positively to all these questions. So number 1, do you feel energized after your exercise? Right? Do you feel good after your exercise? Number 2, 10 to 15 minutes after you complete the exercise and you kind of caught your breath and such, how do you feel? Do you feel like you could emotionally repeat the exercise again? Or are you just like, holy crap, like get me the heck out of this CrossFit box. Like I'm done, you know? And then number 3 would be, how do you feel that night or that next morning? You know, barring, you didn't do any new exercises and you're not going to be sore because the movements are different and you had a good night's sleep. Barring all that stuff, how do you feel? Do you feel hit by a bus? So those are kind of my 3 questions that we need to answer positively for. If we don't, then one of the first things we have to do is cut down the duration. So if we had an hour-long workout 5 days a week, well, we just cut it down to a half hour or 45 minutes. And then we can also cut down the intensity. I find most people do good with intense movement patterns, depending on how fatigued they are, but just keeping them really short. And that could be a Tabata. And if you're really adrenal fatigued, that intensity could be a fast walk to a slow walk kind of interval, to someone swimming, to let's say they have a lot of joint issues. We could even do movements that are in water that don't have the impact, or using an elliptical or a rower, so we're not slamming our joints down. That could be another way we could involve that interval type training. And then if we're still really in a bad place there, then just things like walking in general, even incorporating Tai Chi or Qigong if we're really extremely fatigued hormonally.
I like Qigong. I try to get Hannah, my wife, to do it, and she just laughs every time I start doing it in the living room.
Absolutely. You got it. And I just wanted to add one more thing too. When your conventional doctor is testing for your cortisol, we already talked about it. They're looking at your protein levels, just your typical cortisol serum. So if you see serum, that means it's protein bound. Again, the only way you're going to know it's not protein bound is if it says free next to it. So typically if you're running like your thyroid, they'll run thyroxine T4 free, and you'll see that word free. So that's important. But number 2 on that, it's pretty stressful for most people to get a blood draw. It's like you get that needle, you get the white coat syndrome. They wrap the rubber band around your arm. You have those memories maybe when you were younger getting stuck. So that can be stressful in and of itself. And stress increases cortisol, right? So you can get a lot of people that their blood cortisol actually looks a lot better than what it would be normally, because there's actually a stress response when you're getting the cortisol drawn. And that's why we love the salivary cortisol labs, because there's no, stress spitting in the tube. You're just sitting there and you're just spitting in the tube. That's it. So it's great that we can elicit a measurement without causing a stress response.
Yeah. Instead of adding in other things. I like to talk about subtracting things from people's lives. And one that's really helpful is negativity. Now, whether that's watching too much news or that's just spending time around people that are negative and aren't thinking like you and they're not inspiring you, people like that, energy vampires.
Yeah.
If it's really hateful music or really loud music and you're constantly having to, there's always that guy in the gym that has his headphones so loud you can hear him across the gym. That guy is depending on that music to get him through that workout. That's a crutch. So I try to look at removing the negative inputs too before I even get to adding in the other beneficial supplements and things like that.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is how you start your morning. There's a book called The 6-Minute Miracle Morning where the author talks about gratitude and visualization and affirmations. I'm also a huge fan of, I do a lot of Anthony Robbins' 15 Minutes to Fulfillment, where you get up, and I'm going to do it this afternoon today, but you have 5 minutes of affirmation and tapping on certain meridian points to kind of prime the system. Number 2, you go into kind of a gratitude state. You're really kind of gracious for all the things that you have. And then the last 5 minutes, you go into a visualization. So it's affirmations, gratitude, and visualizations. And that's a great way to prime your system and really get all the beneficial hormones going in the right direction. So I think that's a great way to start your morning off the bat for sure and reduce that negativity.
Great. So supplement-wise, and if this is not the direction you intend, interrupt me and shift it. But I think mentioning a couple helpful supplements for just general support would be a good idea. I really like a good vitamin C complex, not just ascorbic acid, but getting multiple different forms of vitamin C. And if you can do the whole food form, there's a couple good brands out there that have some like derived from organic oranges vitamin C. That's kind of cool. I just haven't noticed that much supplementing it personally, but I think that's kind of my first vitamin that I'd be safe giving a blanket recommendation for.
Yeah, we're on the exact same page. So I'm going to kind of go right into the diet stuff and then dovetail that with the supplements. But off the bat, blood sugar or stress, blood sugar instability is one of the biggest adrenal stressors on the body, right? We talk about what's cortisol. It's a glucocorticosteroid, right? The first part of glucocorticosteroids, gluco meaning blood sugar. So eating every 4 to 5 hours is going to be super important. If you have adrenal issues, if you're stressed, don't intermittent fast. Don't. That's putting a lot of stress on your system. Make sure you're having a good protein and fat-based breakfast. Try to get, your carbs from non-starchy sources or at least low-sugar fruit initially. That's going to be huge because that's going to take away your adrenals from having to pump out cortisol to bring that blood sugar up. Because again, if you eat too much sugar, what happens? You have this reactive hypoglycemic response. Blood sugar goes up like you do on the roller coaster and then crashes down because your insulin sucks that blood sugar right down. And when that blood sugar is down and low, your adrenals are sitting there having to muster up adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine, catecholamines. This is just the same word for adrenaline 3 different times over. And then the cortisol as well to bring that blood sugar back up. So blood sugar is really important. Now on the blood sugar vein, we can use different supplements like chromium and alpha lipoic acid and vanadium and magnesium and cinnamon and gymnema and bitter melon and banaba. So these are different herbs and nutrients that we can use to help stabilize blood sugar. Again, in the hierarchy, the diet part's going to be the most important. The second will be the timing, and the third will be the supplement. So that's a really good start off the bat. Next is we'll use a lot of precursors. We'll use different building block precursors called pregnenolone or DHEA, and we customize these according to the level of adrenal fatigue. So I recommend getting if you're going to ever use a hormonal precursor, you want to have your labs actually checked. You don't want to be supplementing any precursor stuff without labs. Number 3, vitamin C is awesome. Again, vitamin C, reason why a lot of the Eskimos and the Inuit avoided scurvy, right? Scurvy is a disease of basically hemorrhaging of the various capillaries in the body because of lack of vitamin C. And the I think it was the British or the people over in the UK area, they were called limeys because they figured out when they would travel over from the UK to the US hundreds of years ago that people would die if they didn't have vitamin C. So they found that if they just brought a whole bunch of limes and ate these limes, that they would avoid scurvy. So they got the term or the nickname limeys. So vitamin C is really important for that kind of health. But again, the Inuit avoided scurvy because they would eat a lot of glandular tissue. So they would eat the adrenal glands of the mammals that they would kill. And they got a lot of vitamin C from the adrenal glandular tissue because the adrenals love vitamin C. That's why we add the vitamin C in our programs, our protocol, so we support the adrenals. Also, glandular tissue will have a little bit of vitamin C and also a lot of minerals and vitamins that are specific to the gland. And then after that are adaptogenic herbs, which can help bring cortisol up or bring it down. It's kind of a multitasker. It can downshift or upshift depending on where our stress is. And I know you're a big adaptogen guy, so I'll toss the mic over to you and you can kind of give your 2 cents on that.
Yeah, so there's tons of different ones, but I recently just switched over per your recommendation and just to see what's up. I was taking ashwagandha for a while, which is a great adaptogen. You can take it in the morning for energy and endurance, or you could take it in the evening to help sleep. It's very unique, like you just mentioned. But I just switched over to holy basil recently. I think it's the Himalaya brand. They have an organic holy basil extract that's pretty potent. And I've been taking that, and honestly, I feel a little bit like Superman. Like I feel invincible on holy basil compared to ashwagandha. Ashwagandha, I just felt more calm energy. Holy basil, I feel like I just want to pick a kettlebell up and just throw it like a shot put.
So does that mean we get to do the interview now with you wearing a cape?
Maybe.
That'd be awesome. I would like the big S on your shirt. Maybe we'll do it E for Evan with the cape.
Yeah.
Love it.
So maybe that wasn't the most clinical explanation of adaptogens, but my experience with them is that they're very helpful. I think it's kind of a 21st century necessity for people to have some type of adaptogenic support because we need to adapt
100%.
to the environment. The environment's changing. The climate's changing. Economics are changing. Job stress is changing. Gender roles are changing. I mean, I vacuum the floor. You know what I mean? I sweep the kitchen. You know, I have new roles that may not have previously been my roles. Like my grandpa, he didn't necessarily take care of in the home task. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is a tangent, but I'm saying there's so many new things that men and women both are dealing with that they need some adaptogenic support. So I really think it's been one of the most helpful things to keep me from derailing during building a business and all of the stresses that come with being a growing entrepreneur.
Right. And if you look at kind of Darwin's theory of the survival of the fittest, really what he's saying there in that theory is whoever can adapt the quickest and the fastest will be the most successful. So if we have stress coming in our lives, I think an adaptogenic herb of some kind rotated in and out is a foundation to anyone's life because we got stuff coming at us from home with our kids and our family. We have work stuff. We have all of our play stuff and we do on the weekends or on our free time and our exercise and our businesses and all these different things. We need to be able to adapt or even pivot, right? So a good adaptogenic herb helps, one, modulate the immune system. Two, it helps support our hormones, right? Sex hormones like eleuthero helps with DHEA levels. Again, it can also help with libido and such. And two, it's going to help modulate our cortisol up and down. So if we're in this place where we're anxious, we can knock it down. If we're low and depressed, we can bring it back up. And certain herbs may be better for certain things like ashwagandha, maybe sleep and anxiety, eleuthero for vitality, stamina, and exercise, rhodiola for depression, maca for libido and sexual performance, tribulus for muscle mass, and the list goes on.
What did you take today? Have you taken any adaptogens yet?
Evan, of course. So I have my little adaptogenic herb cabinet. I have all my herbs just kind of laid out, and I just sit there and I go, how do I feel today? And I just kind of, use a little bit of intuition of what herb that I'm going to use. But today was an ashwagandha day. Yesterday was an eleuthero and rhodiola day, and before that it was a ginseng day. So I tend to pick things out depending on kind of my mood and whether I'm seeing patients or not. And I really need to be super, super hardcore focused and do a lot of listening. Or if I'm with you and I'm going to be kind of, talkative and, connecting with you. So it depends on what kind of stressors I'm dealing with.
So yesterday, you said yesterday was a rhodiola and what day? Did you add
I think it was a rhodiola and eleuthero day.
Okay, so I haven't combined those two. I've used rhodiola and ashwagandha together, and I love it. But I've never used eleuthero and rhodiola. What's the bonus effect there as opposed to taking rhodiola by itself?
Well, I mean, a lot of people, like you said, they get fairy dusted when they do a lot of these combos. They don't get enough. So a lot of my patients, I'll just recommend a really good combo product so they get the best of both worlds. They're not taking a whole bunch of supplements. I mean, I'm a little crazy, so I can have my 6 or 7 adaptogenic herbs. I mean, I couldn't ask my patients to do that. If they want, they can always ask me and we can get them set up. But I like to have 1 or 2 that we rotate with patients, or a good kind of a good broad spectrum one. So with myself, we kind of just have a whole bunch lined up, and I kind of use my intuition based on what I know and based on my stress levels and how I slept the night before and what I'm going to do on what I need. I think I sidestepped your question. Can you say it again?
Yeah, the question was, what do you feel when combining eleuthero with
Ooh.
rhodiola as opposed to just rhodiola by itself?
You know what? That's a really good question. I don't know per se. I just know the various um, effects and profiles that these herbs have. And there's a lot
Mhm.
of research that they work together synergistically. So for me, it's more based on intuition. I wouldn't be able to crystallize that for you.
Right, and that's totally what I expected. It is hard to feel. I just thought you may have noticed, ooh, when I add this to the cocktail, I feel an extra color enhancement or something like that. I've had some crazy effects combining things. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, I agree. And I think everyone should be on some level of an adaptogenic herb depending on their stress. I think it's super important. Everyone should be on a good quality fish oil if you're not eating good, at least 4 servings of 4 ounces of fish a week, a good adaptogenic herb, and then whatever other nutrients you're missing based on your lab work, people should be on as a minimum kind of foundation, in my opinion. And adrenal support is going to be important because most people are stressed. They're working more. They're under more stress. They're doing more. And that's kind of what's happening in our society. Everyone's go, 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 go. I mean, our work week's gone up 10 hours. We're sleeping less. So anything we can do to help us modulate and adapt to stress, we're definitely better off.
Yep. Well, that's all I had in terms of today's topic. I feel like we could go on tangents for another hour, but I think that's a great, concise overview of this whole picture, the modern 21st century epidemic.
Yeah. And let me just kind of hit one thing home. The Russians in the 40s and 50s and 60s, they actually were doing a lot of research on adaptogenic herbs. They're sitting there, they're like, all right, like we want to have our athletes do better. We want our military to be better. We got this whole thing, the space race going on. What can we do? And they spent tens of millions of dollars, which back then probably, equals hundreds of millions of dollars today, on testing these herbs. I mean, and they found that their military performed better, their athletes were better. They were using herbs to help recover. I mean, they were probably using some steroids too, but they were using some herbs to really help recover from their workouts, to modulate sex hormones, to improve immune function. So after severe exercise or, military mission, so to speak, their immune systems wouldn't be suppressed. So they did a lot of research and experimenting with these herbs. And it's like, man, if people really knew how powerful these things are, I think they'd be part of everyone's rotation, if you will.
It's life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely. Any take-homes from you, Evan, here?
No, just take a baby step from listening. I know there's a lot of information thrown at you. So if there's one lifestyle thing you can tweak, if there's one supplementary thing you can tweak, if you can not skip that meal that you were thinking about skipping, go ahead and get you some good fat and protein. If there's one little piece you can pull out of this podcast today and apply that, that's going to be helping to keep you in a normal rhythm and not become another burnout victim. Or maybe it's the first step to try to help pull you out of that burnout that you're in.
Totally agree. Again, my take home is make sure you get into bed before 11 o'clock. Don't skip breakfast. Eat every 4 to 5 hours. High quality anti-inflammatory protein, good quality fats, healthy carbohydrates for your metabolic type, right? If you're doing a lot of exercise, you may need a little more carbs. And again, find a good functional medicine practitioner. If that's helping a little bit, but it's not getting you over the hump 100%, reach out to someone like myself or Evan so we can get some testing done and we can pull out the sniper rifle, so to speak, and get really specific versus, just general run-of-the-mill adrenal protocols.
Yep, definitely. Well, cool. Well, thanks. It's been a blast.
Thanks, Evan.
All right, bye.
Bye. Bye.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com.